The millionaire expelled her for being too humble in front of everyone. He said she brought shame to his family name. But 5 years later, she lands by helicopter at the mansion. And when he comes down with triplets, he faints in front of the cameras. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We continue. The rising sun painted the city skyline with orange hues, illuminating the skyscrapers that symbolize the capital's economic power. Raphael Anders gazed out at the city from the window of his small rented apartment. At 32, he was a man with striking features, neatly trimmed black hair, and a look of ambition in his eyes. He adjusted his navy blue tie and took a deep breath, mentally rehearsing the presentation he would give that morning. A golden opportunity to impress the shareholders of Continental Developments, one of the country's largest real estate companies. "You're going to rock today," said Louisa Sallon, his wife, approaching with a cup of coffee. At 30, Louisa was a woman of simple, natural beauty, with curly hair that framed a face with delicate features and expressive eyes. A teacher at a public school in the suburbs of the South Zone, she carried in her smile the simplicity and kindness that had characterized her since Raphael had met her in college, when they were both scholarship students struggling to make their place in the capital. "I need to rock, Lou. This is my chance to get out of this apartment and start the life we've always dreamed of," Raphael replied, sipping his coffee as he reviewed his notes. What Louisa didn't know was that Raphael's dreams had changed drastically in the last few months. Since being promoted to project manager at Continental Developments, he had started to circulate among the elite, attending happy hours in luxurious penthouses and dinners in Michelin-starred restaurants. With each new contact, each new environment he experienced, Raphael felt further away from the simple life he shared with Louisa. "Raphael, did you remember to separate those clothes to donate to the neighborhood social project?" "I promised Donna Zofia that we would take them on Sunday," asked Louisa, organizing some textbooks in her colorful fabric bag, made by artisans from a cooperative that she helped coordinate on the weekends. "Ah, Lou, I completely forgot. I have that brunch at Dr. Marcello's house on Sunday, remember? He's the president of the company. I can't cancel it," Raphael replied, avoiding looking directly at his wife. "Again? This is the third social engagement you've made in the last 15 days. I thought we could spend some time together." Louisa sighed, trying to hide the disappointment in her voice. Raphael closed the document folder with unnecessary force. "And I thought you understood how important this network of contacts is for my career, for our future. I can't just turn down invitations from my boss to go around delivering old clothes to social projects." The silence hung heavy between them. It wasn't the first time they had had this discussion, but something in Raphael's tone had changed. There was a coldness, a distance that Louisa didn't recognize in the man she had fallen in love with years ago. "It's not just old clothes, Raphael. It's about helping people who didn't have the same opportunities as us," Louisa replied, in the calm voice she used with her most difficult students. "And I thought our future was built together, not just with titles and status." Raphael looked at his watch as if looking for an excuse to end the conversation. "I have to go. I have a meeting in 30 minutes. That night, the apartment was quiet when Louisa came home from school. She found a note from Raphael saying he was having dinner with clients and didn't have a set time to return. She sighed, helping herself to some soup she had prepared the night before. As she ate alone, she looked at the framed photos on the living room wall, memories of a time when they shared dreams and values. When had they started to follow such different paths? Over the next few weeks, Raphael became increasingly absent. He would return late, always with stories about business dinners, corporate events, and new connections he had made. His once modest wardrobe now featured Italian suits and silk ties. His vocabulary incorporated English terms and references to expensive wines that Louisa had never tasted. One Saturday afternoon, Louisa was organizing some documents when she found credit card statements with exorbitant amounts from restaurants and luxury stores. She felt a knot in her stomach when she saw that Raphael had bought a watch that cost 4 times her monthly salary as a teacher. "What's this, Raphael?" he asked when he arrived, showing the statements. "Are we going into debt for you to keep?" Up appearances? It's not about appearances, he replied defensively. It's about investing in my professional image. No one takes seriously an executive who doesn't dress and behave like one. And who were you before all this? The boy I knew, who valued honesty and hard work, didn't need a $20,000 watch to be respected, Louisa replied, her eyes welling up. That boy was naive and didn't understand how the world works. Raphael's voice rose. I'm tired of being the scholarship student, the employee who came from the suburbs. I want to be seen as an equal by these people, you know? And to do that, I need to become one of them. The argument escalated quickly. Louisa mentioned the values they had built together, while Raphael argued that she didn't understand the demands of the corporate world. The climax came when Raphael was invited to spend a weekend at the country house of Dr. Marcelo Corvin, the president of the real estate company and a symbol of everything Raphael aspired to be. You can come with me, but you need to adapt, Raphael said as he sorted out clothes for the trip. No talking about your suburban students or those welfare projects, and please wear that dress I gave you last month. Louisa looked at him as if she saw a stranger. Do you want me to pretend to be someone else? To hide everything that matters to me and who I am to impress people who judge us by what we wear and not by who we are? I want you to help me grow, not drag me down, Raphael burst out. The words were out before he could stop them, heavy as lead in the air between them. The silence that followed was deafening. Louisa felt as if each word was a dagger piercing her chest. Raphael, realizing the impact of what he had said, tried to take it back, but it was too late. So is that what I am to you now? A burden? An obstacle to your precious social ascension? Asked Louisa with a calm that contrasted with the storm in her eyes. You know that's not what I meant. That's exactly what I said, Raphael. And I finally understand what's been going on for months. You're not just looking for a better career. You're looking for a different life, one where I don't fit in. That night, the argument culminated in an explosion of pent-up emotions. Harsh words were exchanged, revealing wounds that both had been silently carrying. When the sun rose on Sunday, Raphael was alone in the apartment, surrounded by the shards of what had once been his marriage. If that's what you want, then go. Build your new life with your new friends. But don't expect me to be here waiting for you when you realize the real price of that ambition, were Louisa's last words, before walking out the door with only a suitcase and a broken heart. The rain was falling mercilessly over the capital when Louisa got off the bus. Dragging her soaked suitcase, she walked to the small house where her friend Fernanda Olivier lived. The tears streaming down her face mingled with the raindrops in a silent lament that seemed to accompany every step. Fernanda, a 31-year-old psychologist who had met Louisa in college, showed no surprise when she opened the door and found her friend in such a state. For weeks, she had been noticing signs that Louisa's marriage was falling apart each time her friend cancelled their dates to give space to Raphael and his new social connections. It's over. He chose the life he wants and I'm not part of it, Louisa said between sobs as her friend hugged her on the doorstep. You're part of my life and that's what matters now, Fernanda replied, leading her inside. Stay as long as you need. Tomorrow, things will seem a little less devastating. But the days that followed did not bring the relief that Fernanda had promised. Louisa alternated between moments of profound sadness and outbursts of rage, wondering where she had gone wrong, how she had failed to notice the signs of Raphael's transformation. She spent hours looking at her cell phone, waiting for a message, a call that would indicate remorse. His silence, however, was more eloquent than any words. One particularly difficult afternoon, while organizing the few belongings she had brought with her, Louisa found an old notebook. As she leafed through it, she came across notes from when she had volunteered as a teacher in a squat in the East Zone, even before she had graduated. There she recorded her dreams, projects, and the conviction that education could transform realities. Had she distanced herself from those ideals while trying to conform to Raphael's expectations? Maybe it's time to get back on track, she thought, feeling a spark of determination ignite amidst the darkness that surrounded her. The next day, Louisa called her former coordinator at the NGO, where she had worked before taking the position at the public school. Juliet Moreno, a 45-year-old black woman who had dedicated her life to social work, welcomed her with a warm hug and eyes that seemed to see beyond her dark circles and haggard expression. "You've always had a place here, girl, and now more than ever we need someone with your sensitivity to coordinate the new project with the women of Villa Harmonia," said Juliet, leading Louisa to a room where other women were animatedly discussing spreadsheets and schedules. The project aimed to provide professional training and psychological support to women in vulnerable situations, many of whom had been abandoned by their partners or were facing domestic violence. When she heard their stories during the first meeting she coordinated, Louisa felt an immediate connection. She was not alone in her pain, and perhaps she could transform it into something bigger than herself. While Louisa slowly rebuilt her life, dedicating herself entirely to the project and continuing her classes at the public school, Raphael seemed to finally reach the place he had longed for. Photos of him at popular events appeared frequently on social media, always accompanied by influential people and in luxurious settings. 3 months after the separation, Fernanda arrived home excited, with a business magazine in her hands. "Look who's here," she said, showing a report on the promising young people of the real estate market. In the photo, Raphael was smiling next to Marcelo Corvin, both in impeccable suits in front of a model of a luxury development. Louisa felt a tightness in her chest, but not for the reasons she had imagined. It wasn't jealousy or regret, it was a strange feeling of looking at a stranger. The man in the photo, with his calculated smile and studied posture, was nothing like the idealistic young man she had fallen in love with years ago. "He got what he wanted," she said simply, handing the magazine back to her friend. "And you? What do you want, Lou?" asked Fernanda, with the perspicacity that made her an excellent psychologist. The question echoed in Louisa's mind for days. What did she really want for her future, now that the plans she had made with Raphael had fallen apart? The answer began to take shape during a visit to the Villa Harmonia community, where the project with the women was gaining momentum. Mariana, one of the participants, approached Louisa timidly after a craft workshop. At just 23 years old, she was already a single mother of 5-year-old twins and worked as a housekeeper to support them. "Teacher, I wanted to thank you for the daycare you organized during the courses. It's the first time in years that I've been able to do something for myself without worrying about who will take care of the children," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. That simple thank you was like an epiphany for Louisa. In the following days, she dedicated herself to developing a broader project, which included not only professional training, but also educational support for the children of the women served, creating a space where mothers could develop while their children received a quality education. He presented the idea to Juliet, who embraced it enthusiastically. "This isn't just a project, Louisa. It's a movement for community transformation, and I think you're exactly the person to lead it." 6 months after leaving the apartment she shared with Raphael, Louisa moved into a small 2-story house near Villa Harmonia. Although modest, the place had a spacious backyard that she soon transformed into a green area with a community garden. The ground floor was adapted to host workshops and courses, while the second floor became her home. Simple, welcoming, and above all, genuinely hers. The Floresa project, as it was called, grew organically. Women who initially sought only vocational courses began to get involved in other activities, forming a network of mutual support. Some discovered they were talented artisans, others revealed talents for cooking or administrative skills. More than a social project, it became a community. One afternoon in September, while she was teaching a group of women how to paint on fabric, Louisa received a call that would change the course of her life once again. Clara Montel, a social worker for the Child Protection Council, urgently needed a temporary place to shelter 3 children, 4-year-old triplets who had lost their parents in a tragic car accident and had no other family members nearby. "No, it's not exactly your job, Louisa, but we're overwhelmed and these kids need to be together. Your project was the first one that came to mind, Clara explained, her voice thick with concern. Louisa hesitated for a moment. The project was not structured for this type of care, and she herself was still in the process of emotional healing. However, something in her heart opened when hours later she saw the three little ones arrive hand in hand at Floresa. Lucas, Lara, and Leo Silva all had the same almond-shaped eyes and curly hair, although each had already demonstrated distinct personalities. Lucas, the most talkative, immediately began exploring the space. Lara, the observant one, stayed close to the social worker, carefully analyzing each adult present. Leo, the most sensitive, clung to a small toy guitar, refusing to let go even when offered snacks. They are very attached to each other, Clara explained, and they have impressive artistic talents for their age. Their mother was a music teacher. That night, as she tucked the children into makeshift mattresses in her room, Louisa felt an inexplicable connection with those little beings who, like her, had suddenly lost everything. When Leo, the quietest of the three, picked up his little guitar and began to strum a soft melody, something snapped inside her, not with pain, but with possibility. 2 weeks turned into a month, and Louisa realized that she could no longer be separated from her children. She began the complex adoption process, facing bureaucracy and uncertainty, but determined to provide Lucas, Lara, and Leo with not only a home, but a life full of love and opportunities. What had begun as a temporary solution had become her heart's deepest desire. In those three children, Louisa found a new reason to move forward, to build something meaningful from the broken pieces of her previous dreams. And in their eyes, she discovered not only the reflection of her own capacity for overcoming, but also the promise of a future where true wealth is not measured by status or possessions, but by the bonds of love we choose to create and nurture. The first anniversary of the Floresa project was celebrated with a party that took over the entire street of Villa Harmonia. Colorful stalls displayed the crafts produced by the women involved in the project, while the aroma of homemade treats filled the air. In the center of the improvised square, a small stage hosted performances by children who attended music and dance classes offered by the initiative. Louisa watched everything with a mixture of pride and disbelief. In just 1 year, what had started as a simple job training program had become a community movement that had already impacted the lives of more than 200 families. Beside her, Lucas, Lara, and Leo, now officially her children after months of legal battles, anxiously awaited their turn to perform. "Mommy, do you really think people will like it?" Lara asked, adjusting the red bow that tied her curls. At 5 years old, she already demonstrated an extraordinary talent for the violin, an instrument that Louisa had obtained through a donation from a music school in the west side of the city. "You'll love it, my love." "How could you not?" Louisa replied, bending down to the girl's eye level. "Remember what I always say, when you do something from the heart, people feel it." Lucas, holding a small instrument, was already practicing some dance moves he had learned in classes offered by Mestre Zula, a 70-year-old man who had volunteered to teach Afro art to the community's children. Leo, in turn, was carefully tuning his guitar, an instrument that had practically become an extension of his body. Although they were physically identical triplets, each had developed a unique personality and talents that Louisa made sure to nurture individually. "Donna Luisa," called Donna Zofia, a 63-year-old woman who coordinated the craft group. "There are people from the culture department here who want to speak to you." Louisa gave her children an apologetic look and walked toward the group of people who clearly did not belong to that community. Dressed in formal clothes and carrying clipboards, they seemed out of place among the colorful stalls and lively music. "Professor Louisa Sallin?" "I'm Pierre Meyer from the Municipal Department of Culture." A middle-aged man introduced himself, extending his hand. "We've come to see for ourselves the project that has caused such a stir in the city's cultural circles." The impromptu meeting, in the shade of a mango tree, revealed that the Floresa project had been nominated for an award for transformative cultural initiatives. In addition to the recognition, substantial financial support would be provided that would allow the expansion of activities and the hiring of more professionals. You have transformed an area known only for problems into a cultural hub. And the most impressive thing is that you did it from the bottom up, with real community involvement, commented one of the evaluators as she watched the children performing on stage. At that moment, the triplets took the stage. Leo began with soft chords on the guitar, soon accompanied by Lara's delicate violin. Lucas joined in with his instrument, creating a unique fusion of sounds that mixed elements of classical music and different rhythms. The audience fell silent, captured by the unusual harmony and the expression of pure joy on the children's faces. When the performance ended, the applause erupted deafeningly. Pierre Meyer approached Louisa again, visibly impressed. "Are those your children? They have extraordinary talent." "They are my treasures," Louisa replied, feeling her eyes well up as the children ran toward her, overjoyed by the crowd's reaction. "And they are just the beginning of what this community has to offer when given the opportunity." The recognition from the Department of Culture opened doors that Louisa had never even imagined. The following months, the Floresa project won not only the municipal award, but also the attention of the media and potential supporters. A special segment on a popular Sunday program featured the story of Louisa and the triplets, highlighting how a woman who had lost everything found the strength to rebuild not only her life, but also to positively impact an entire community. With the new resources, Louisa was able to rent an abandoned warehouse near the townhouse and transform it into a suitable cultural space. Rooms were adapted for music, dance, and visual arts classes. A small amphitheater was built for performances, and the outdoor area gained a public square with an expanded community garden. The Floresa Cultural Center was inaugurated with a celebration that brought together everyone from community residents to government officials. The triplets, now 6 years old, were the stars of the night with a performance that mixed music and theater, telling the story of the community's own overcoming. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Rafael Anders was looking out over the city from his newly acquired penthouse. The view was spectacular. The capital stretched out beneath him as a testament to his success. In just 2 years, he had risen from project manager to new business director at Continental Developments, now responsible for multi-million-dollar developments in prime areas of the capital. His apartment was decorated with designer pieces, contemporary art, and imported furniture. He frequented the most exclusive restaurants, was invited to VIP events, and maintained a social circle made up of influential businessmen and celebrities. From the outside, his life seemed perfect. That night, however, as he savored a rare whiskey, alone on his terrace, a familiar uneasiness accompanied him. The immense apartment amplified the silence that had become his constant companion. The conversations he had, always about business or pleasantries, left an empty taste after the usual smiles. Even the brief relationships he had had since the separation seemed superficial, based more on appearances and convenience than on genuine connections. His phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Marcelo Corvin inviting him to a charity event this weekend, a contemporary art auction whose proceeds would go to social projects. "Good publicity for the company and a great networking opportunity," the message said. Raphael automatically confirmed his presence, as he did with all of Marcelo's invitations. It was then that he noticed the date. It had been exactly 2 years since Louisa had left his life. 2 years without hearing that spontaneous laugh that had so enchanted him in college, without the deep conversations they had until dawn, without the sincerity of those eyes that saw him as he really was, not as the persona he had created. "Is she okay?" he asked himself, running his finger down his phone screen until he found Louisa's old contact, which he had never had the courage to delete. For a moment, he considered calling her just to see how she was. But what would he say? That he missed her while living the very life he had chosen over her. That he sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, seeking her presence, only to remember that he had traded the warmth of her embrace for the cold comfort of material success. The phone was returned to his pocket without the call being made. Instead, Raphael poured himself another shot of whiskey and went back to gazing at the illuminated city, trying to convince himself that the emptiness he felt was just tiredness. After a long day of work. The next morning, during a meeting with investors, Raphael was surprised by a suggestion from Marcelo Corvin. "We are growing at a fast pace in high-end developments. But there is an emerging market that we cannot ignore," the company's president said, showing charts in a presentation. "Social housing with architectural quality and adequate urban planning." The proposal was to develop projects in suburban areas undergoing revitalization processes, offering affordable housing, but with high standards of construction and community infrastructure. One of the neighborhoods mentioned in the presentation was Villa Harmonia. "This particular neighborhood has shown some interesting cultural development in recent months," Marcelo continued. "There is a community center that has completely transformed the local dynamic. It would be a great starting point for our pilot project." Raphael felt his heart race when he saw the name Floresa Cultural Center in the presentation, accompanied by photos of a vibrant space filled with children and women engaged in artistic activities. Could this be possible? Excused himself and discreetly looked for information on his cell phone. There it was, recent reports on the award-winning social project led by Luisa Salin, a former teacher who had transformed a simple idea into a community empowerment movement. The stories highlighted not only the social impact of the initiative, but also the personal story of its founder's resilience and the exceptional talent of her 3 adopted children. "Children," Raphael murmured, almost dropping his cell phone when he saw the photo of Luisa, hugging 3 identical children, with radiant smiles that lit up their faces. The Luisa in the photo was nothing like the hurt woman who had left his apartment 2 years earlier. There was a quiet strength about her, a serene confidence that made her even more beautiful than he remembered. "Raphael, you will be responsible for the preliminary study of this project." Marcelo's voice brought him back to the reality of the meeting room. "Your experience with integrated projects will be valuable for this new approach." That night, Raphael could barely sleep. Images of Luisa with the triplets mixed with memories of their time together and the harsh words they had exchanged in their last argument. The life she had built seemed so full of meaning, while his, despite all his material success, was marked by a void that no professional achievement had been able to fill. Determined to see for himself what Luisa had created, Raphael headed to Villa Harmonia the following afternoon. He parked his imported car a few blocks from the Floresa Cultural Center, aware that the vehicle would attract unwanted attention in that simple neighborhood. He approached on foot, feeling strangely nervous, as if he were about to invade a territory to which he no longer belonged. The cultural center was bustling with activity, even on a weekday. Children ran around the courtyard, women chatted animatedly as they worked on crafts, and soft music drifted through the open windows. Raphael stood at a safe distance, watching. It was then that he saw them. 3 small, identical figures sitting under a tree, each with a musical instrument, completely absorbed in a melody they were creating together. 5 years had passed since Raphael's first furtive visit to the Floresa Cultural Center. Villa Harmonia, previously known only for its social problems, had become a model of urban revitalization, often cited at conferences on community development. Continental Development's housing project was only the beginning of a transformation that had attracted investments of various kinds, always with care taken to preserve the essence and interests of the local community. The Floresa Cultural Center had expanded to 3 locations spread across the southern part of the capital, all following the same philosophy of empowerment through education and art. Luisa Salin, at 37, was now a respected figure in social development circles, frequently invited to lecture at universities and international events. Funding that had previously been scarce now came from partnerships with companies, foundations, and even public funding. On a sunny Saturday morning, Floresa's main auditorium was packed for the annual music program student recital. Backstage, Luisa adjusted Leo's bow tie, while Lara practiced scales on her violin, and Lucas reviewed the sheet music one last time. "Are you nervous?" he asked, looking at the triplets, now 11, who had grown in height and talent. They were no longer the shy children he had adopted. They had become confident teenagers, each developing not only extraordinary musical abilities, but also unique and complementary personalities. Not at all, Lucas, the most outgoing of the E3, replied with a confident smile. We've been preparing for months. It's going to be amazing, Mom. Leo, always more introspective, simply nodded, but his eyes were shining with anticipation of the performance. Lara, balancing introversion and assertiveness, approached her mother and whispered, "There are a lot of important people out there. The conductor of the symphony orchestra is in the front row." Louisa smiled. Her children had become minor celebrities in the local music scene. What had started as simple music lessons for children in the community had turned into an excellent program that had already revealed many talents. The triplets, however, were special. They possessed not only exceptional technique, but an almost supernatural connection when they played together, creating arrangements that blended classical elements with different rhythms in innovative ways. Remember what I always say. The technique is impressive, but it's the emotion that transforms, the three added in unison, in a tradition that was repeated before each performance. When the triplets took the stage, a reverent silence fell over the auditorium. The piece they were about to perform was an original composition, created by them under the guidance of a respected composer who had volunteered as a mentor after hearing one of their performances at a festival. Titled Rebirth, the piece musically narrated a journey of loss, grief, and ultimately rebuilding and hope, a reflection of their own family history. The first notes of Leo's guitar, melancholic and introspective, gradually gave way to Lara's soulful violin. Lucas, on percussion, added layers of rhythmic complexity that transformed the atmosphere of the piece. As the music evolved, the concentrated expressions of the three young musicians reflected their complete immersion in the moment, as if the room full of spectators simply disappeared. For the next 7 minutes, the audience was taken on an emotional roller coaster that culminated in a powerful crescendo representing the triumph of the human spirit over adversity. As the final note reverberated through the auditorium, there was a moment of absolute silence, as if no one dared break the spell. Then, like a wave, the audience erupted in applause that quickly turned into a standing ovation. Louisa, watching from backstage, felt the tears flow freely. How much beauty had been born from pain. How many lives had been transformed from a moment that at the time had seemed like the end of everything. The triplets, embraced in the center of the stage, were living proof that the deepest wounds could be transformed into sources of creation and rebirth. After the performance, while the triplets were surrounded by enthusiastic admirers, Louisa was approached by an elegant lady who introduced herself as a representative of a prestigious music school in the capital. "Your children have an extraordinary gift, Mrs. Sallon. We would like to offer full scholarships to all three of them at our institution," the woman said, holding out a card. "Their talent deserves to be nurtured with the best resources available." It wasn't the first offer of this kind they had received. In recent years, several schools and conservatories had shown interest in the triplets. Louisa had always left the decision in the hands of her children, who until then preferred to continue their studies in the Florescer program, where they could share what they learned with other children in the community. "I appreciate your interest. We will consider it carefully," Louisa replied diplomatically. She knew that sooner or later the triplets would need greater challenges to continue growing artistically. The idea of seeing them soaring higher filled her with pride, even if it meant less time together. Meanwhile, just a few miles away, at an exclusive restaurant, Raphael Anders was celebrating his recent promotion to Vice President of Continental Developments. The table was filled with top executives and their entourage, all impeccably dressed and chatting about the latest real estate trends, award-winning wines, and exclusive vacation destinations. At 39, Raphael had reached the pinnacle of his career. His signature was on some of the company's most profitable and acclaimed projects, including the award-winning Villa Harmonia revitalization project, which had brought the company not only financial returns, but also prestige in the field of corporate social responsibility. He dressed exclusively in tailor-made Italian suits, drove a German sports car, and lived in a mansion in the exclusive Alta Villa condominium on the outskirts of the capital. A toast to our most brilliant executive. proposed Marcelo Corvin, now with completely grey hair, but maintaining the same imposing posture as always. The man who showed us that it is possible to combine profit and social impact in a masterful way. Champagne glasses were raised as approving smiles circulated around the table. Raphael thanked them with a modest nod, saying a few words about teamwork and the company's innovative vision. His smile, perfectly calibrated to convey confidence without arrogance, did not reveal the emptiness he felt growing inside him with each new professional success. The truth that Raphael had never publicly admitted was that the Villa Harmonia project had never been about social responsibility for him. It had been his way of staying connected, even if indirectly, to Louisa's life. In the first few months he had visited the neighborhood frequently, always keeping his distance, just to catch a glimpse of the woman he had abandoned, and the children she had raised with so much love. He had never had the courage to approach her or make contact. What would he say? How would he explain that despite all his accumulated wealth and prestige, he secretly envied the meaningful life she had built? How would he confess that his subsequent relationships had been meaningless, mere social accessories, to complement his carefully cultivated image? "Raphael, did you hear Camilla's question?" Marcelo's voice brought him back to the present. "Sorry, I was distracted. Can you repeat that?" he asked, addressing the attractive young woman sitting across from him, the daughter of a prominent investor who, from the interested look she was giving him, clearly saw him as a promising prospect. "I asked about your weekend plans. Dad mentioned that you're a classical music lover," she repeated, with a studied smile. "Oh yes," he replied automatically, though his interest in classical music was superficial, more a part of his social persona than a genuine passion. "I don't really have any definite plans yet." The conversation drifted to other topics, as Raphael did what had become his specialty, presenting a polished, pleasant version of himself that perfectly aligned with the expectations of his social circle. He answered questions with the charm and confidence everyone expected, while his mind wandered to questions he dared not share. When dinner finally ended, he politely declined Camilla's invitation for an additional drink, citing a morning engagement the next day. In fact, the prospect of a few more hours of superficial conversation seemed unbearable at that moment. Upon arriving at his mansion, Raphael dismissed the security guard who was on night patrol and entered alone. The absolute silence of the 800-square-meter house welcomed him like an old acquaintance. He loosened his tie and poured himself a shot of whiskey, walking to the balcony that offered a privileged view of the city in the distance. On his desk in his office, a folder contained the latest reports on the Floresa Cultural Center. As vice president responsible for the revitalization project, he received regular updates on the activities of the institution that had become the beating heart of the community. He knew about Louisa's successes, the Triplets' achievements, and the lives transformed by the tireless work of the woman he had once called a weight in his rise. The contrast between their lives could not be more stark. While he accumulated possessions and status, she accumulated stories of transformation and love. While his home remained impeccably tidy and cold, hers brimmed with life and meaning. While he was admired for what he owned and represented, she was loved for who she was and what she offered to the world. That night, as he watched the city lights, Raphael allowed himself a rare honesty. He was deeply alone. His achievements, so envied by others, did not bring him the fulfillment he had hoped for. The success he had pursued with such determination had turned out to be a gilded prison, where he had traded authenticity for approval, genuine connections for strategic networking, and true love for the illusion of perfection. His phone buzzed with a notification. It was an automated email from the marketing department listing the company's sponsored events for the coming month. One item in particular caught his eye: Floresa Cultural Center's annual benefit gala, special performance by the poor, prodigious Triplets. The event was scheduled to take place in 2 weeks at the capital's theater and would be attended by authorities, business people, and important figures from the cultural scene. As one of the main institutional sponsors, Continental Developments would have a reserved table, and Raphael, as vice president responsible for the social area, was expected to be the official representative. It would be his first face-to-face meeting with Louisa in 7 years. The idea provoked a confusing mix of anxiety, anticipation, and fear he had not experienced in a long time. What would he say to her? How would he react to seeing her in person, no longer as a distant figure observed from afar or through photographs? In corporate reports? Finishing his whiskey in a single gulp, Raphael made a decision. It was time to confront the ghost that had haunted his empty life of success. It was time to look into the eyes of the woman he had abandoned and acknowledge the truth he had been avoiding for years. His greatest professional achievement had also been his greatest personal loss. The Capitol's theatre, with its imposing architecture inspired by the Paris Opera, was lit up for the Floresa Cultural Centre's charity gala. Luxury cars paraded through the main entrance, bringing together personalities from the business, political and artistic worlds who, that night, were united for a cause that transcended ideological or social differences. Behind the scenes, Louisa oversaw the final details with the quiet efficiency that had become her trademark. At 37, her curly hair now displayed a few silver strands that she had never bothered to hide, each one representing a battle, a triumph, a lesson. She wore an elegant navy blue dress designed and made by one of the first students in Floresa's fashion program, now a promising fashion designer. "Mom, can I talk to you for a minute?" Lara's voice interrupted her thoughts. The 11-year-old, already dressed for the performance in a white ensemble that contrasted beautifully with her dark skin, seemed unusually eager. "Of course, my love. Is everything okay?" asked Louisa, leading her daughter to a quieter corner, away from the hustle and bustle of the preparations. "What if I can't? There are so many important people out there." Lara's voice trembled slightly. Despite her extraordinary talent, she still struggled with anxiety before important performances, especially when it came to her own compositions. Louisa knelt down to be at her daughter's eye level, taking her small hands, which were already calloused by the violin strings. "Lara, remember what we talked about fear?" "That he only has the power we give him," the girl replied automatically. "And remember why we play music?" A faint smile appeared on Lara's face. Not to impress, but to express and connect. "Exactly," Louisa smiled, adjusting a stray strand of her daughter's hair. "Those people out there aren't here to judge you. They're here to connect with something bigger, something that you, Lucas, and Leo create together. Something that reminds people that there's beauty in the world, even in the hard times." Lara's eyes lit up with renewed understanding. "Like it did for us, right? When you found us." "Yes, my love, just like what happened to us." At that moment, Lucas and Leo approached, already ready in their identical ensembles to Lara's. The three of them, despite their distinct personalities, shared an almost supernatural connection when it came to music, as if they could read each other's thoughts, anticipating every note, every pause, every emotional nuance. "We're ready, Mom," Lucas, the natural leader of the trio, announced. "We made some last-minute adjustments to the ending. It's going to be even more impactful." "I trust you completely," Louisa replied, hugging all three of them simultaneously. "Now I need to check that everything is okay at the reception. You have 20 minutes before you have to go in. Focus and remember, play with an open heart." As she made her way to the main lobby, where guests were already circulating with glasses of champagne and lively conversation, Louisa couldn't help but reflect on the unlikely journey that had brought her there. If someone had told her on that rainy night when she had left Raphael's apartment with only a suitcase and a broken heart, that one day she would be organizing a charity event at the theatre with her 3 children as the main attraction, she would have thought it impossible. How surprising life could be in its twists and turns. Outside the theatre, Raphael Anders sat in his sports car, watching the action with a mixture of anxiety and hesitation. He had been mentally rehearsing this moment for days, imagining what he would say when he finally came face to face with Louisa after so many years. All of his carefully prepared words, however, seemed inadequate and empty now that the moment was approaching. His phone rang. It was Marcelo Corvin, probably already inside the theatre, asking about his delay. Raphael ignored the call. He needed a few more minutes to gather his courage. He adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror, noticing the small wrinkles that were beginning to form around his eyes. Despite all his material success, the years had not been kind to his soul. "You can do it," he muttered to himself. "It's just a social event like so many others." But it wasn't, and he knew it. It was a confrontation with the biggest mistake of his life, with the person he had abandoned in the name of an ambition that now seemed empty and meaningless. It was an encounter with the most authentic version of himself, the one he had buried beneath layers of professional success and social approval. Finally, taking a deep breath, Raphael got out of the car and handed the keys to the valet. He walked up the steps of the theater with the confident posture that had become second nature to him, greeting acquaintances with practiced smiles and firm handshakes. On the outside, he was the perfect image of a successful executive. On the inside, his heart was pounding like that of a nervous teenager before a first date. As he entered the main lobby, he was immediately surrounded by people eager to talk. To the Vice President of Continental Developments, politicians seeking support for projects, artists hoping for sponsorship, business people interested in partnerships. Raphael navigated these interactions with the skill of someone who had spent years refining the art of strategic social conversation. That was when he saw her, across the room, chatting animatedly with a diverse group of people. Louisa radiated, a quiet confidence that made her even more beautiful than he remembered. It wasn't the manufactured artificial beauty so common in his social circle, but something deeper and more authentic, the beauty of someone at peace with themselves and their purpose in the world. For a moment, Raphael stood frozen, unable to move forward or back. The woman before him seemed simultaneously familiar and strange, the same expressive eyes, the same captivating smile, but her presence stronger, more centered, as if the years had granted her a wisdom that only comes through overcoming adversity. It was Marcelo Corvin who inadvertently provoked the inevitable encounter, approaching Raphael and practically dragging him towards the group where Louisa was. Our vice president has finally arrived. Louisa, do you know Raphael Anders? He is the person most responsible for the support our company has given to Floresa in recent years." Time seemed to freeze when their gazes finally met. For a brief moment, Raphael glimpsed surprise in Louisa's eyes, quickly replaced by a composed expression that did not reveal the whirlwind of emotions that had surely hit her. "Yes, we have known each other for many years," she replied with surprising calm, extending her hand in a formal gesture. "It is good to see you again, Raphael." "The pleasure is mine," he replied automatically, feeling the softness of that hand he had once known so well. "Your work with Flourish is extraordinary." A superficial conversation ensued with Marcelo, dominating much of the dialogue, unaware of the history they shared. They talked about the project, about expansion plans, about the impact on the community, formal words that served as a thin barrier against the real issues that hung in the air between them. When Marcelo was called away by another guest, leaving them momentarily alone, an uncomfortable silence settled in. It was Louisa who finally broke it. "So you've been the one signing the sponsorship checks all these years," she said, a hint of irony in her voice. "The world takes interesting turns, doesn't it?" "Louisa, Raphael began, but was interrupted by the announcement that the show would start in 15 minutes and everyone should head to the auditorium. "I need to check that everything is ready with the children," she said, visibly relieved by the interruption. "I hope you enjoy the presentation." Before Raphael could respond, she had already walked away, leaving him with all the unspoken words weighing on his chest. The theater, with its 1,500 seats, was completely packed. Raphael took his place at the table reserved for representatives of Continental Developments, close to the stage. From there he could observe every detail of the carefully prepared set, simple but elegant, with elements that referred to the various artistic expressions developed at the Floresa Cultural Center. Louisa took the stage to officially welcome the audience, thanking everyone present for their support and briefly explaining the importance of the funds raised that night. She spoke with a natural eloquence that captivated the audience, mixing moving personal stories with concrete data about the impact of the project. There was not a trace of the insecurity that Raphael remembered about her. The woman on stage was a leader who was confident in her mission and her worth. To close this special evening, Louisa announced, "I am honored to introduce 3 young artists who are living proof of the transformative power of art in our lives. They have not only overcome difficult circumstances, but have transformed their experiences into beauty that they generously share with the world. With you, Lucas, Lara, and Leo Salon." The audience applauded enthusiastically as 3 identical figures entered the stage, each carrying an instrument. Even from a distance, Raphael could see the incredible physical resemblance between them, as well as the subtle differences in their expressions and postures that revealed distinct personalities. The triplets stood in a semicircle in the center of the stage. There was no sheet music. The piece they would perform, the program in their hands explained, was an original composition titled Travesia, inspired by their own stories and the journey of flourish. At the first chords of Leo's guitar, Raphael felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something deeply moving about the melody, a mix of melancholy and hope that seemed to speak directly to his soul. When Lara's violin joined in, adding layers of emotion, and Lucas's percussion completed the harmony with rhythms that harked back to his roots, Raphael found himself completely absorbed, momentarily forgetting where he was. The music told a story. It began with lonely, mournful notes, evolved into controlled chaos that conveyed confusion and pain, and gradually transformed into something luminous and transcendent. It was as if the triplets had captured in sound the essence of human resilience, the ability to find beauty even in the face of devastation. As the last note reverberated through the theater, there was a moment of absolute silence before the audience erupted in applause. People rose to their feet spontaneously, some visibly moved. Raphael realized that his own face was wet with tears he had not even noticed shedding. The triplets, their identical smiles lighting up their faces, bowed in thanks. Louisa came up on stage to join them, and the sight of the 4 of them embracing, radiating genuine happiness, sent a sharp pang of loss and regret through Raphael. This could have been his family too, he thought. This connection, this shared purpose, this unconditional love, everything he had sacrificed on the altar of his ambition. After the performance, as the guests filed into the foyer for the closing cocktail party, Raphael remained seated, unable to join in the small talk and superficial praise. The triplets' music had touched something deep inside him, awakening questions he had been avoiding for years. What did he truly value in life? What would he leave as his legacy when it was all over? Who would be by his side celebrating his true victories, not just his professional achievements? Determined not to let the evening end without a real conversation, with Louisa, Raphael finally got up and headed to the foyer. He found her surrounded by enthusiastic admirers and potential donors, skillfully navigating between sincere thanks and passionate explanations about the next steps of the project. From a distance, he observed how she interacted with different people, the genuine care she gave to each one regardless of their social status or giving potential. It was the same Louisa he had met years ago, her authenticity intact, only stronger and more sure of her place in the world. The triplets moved around the room with a charming mix of politeness and childlike spontaneity, answering questions about their music with a maturity that was surprising for their age. Raphael noticed how they often looked at Louisa, as if to confirm that they were doing the right thing, and how she responded with small gestures of approval and encouragement. When the crowd around Louisa finally slowed, Raphael gathered his courage and approached. "The performance was extraordinary," he said, with a sincerity that surprised even himself. "Your children are incredibly talented." "Thank you," Louisa replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "They worked hard for tonight." "Louisa, could we talk in private?" Raphael asked, aware of the discomfort his presence caused but determined not to waste that opportunity. She hesitated for a moment, as if weighing the pros and cons of reliving a painful chapter from her past. "I only have a few minutes," she finally replied, There's a balcony on the second floor that should be quiet by now. The balcony on the second floor of the theatre offered a privileged view of the square and the valley illuminated at night. The hustle and bustle of the charity event reached there muffled, creating a bubble of relative tranquility amidst the hustle and bustle of the event. Louisa leaned on the marble parapet, feeling the night breeze caress her face as she mentally organized her defenses for the conversation she was about to have. Raphael remained a few steps behind, suddenly unsure of how to proceed. The speech he had been rehearsing for days seemed inadequate in the face of the real woman before him, so different from the image he had preserved in his memories, and yet so essentially the same Louisa he had once loved. "You have 5 minutes. Raphael," she said, breaking the silence without turning around. "The children need to go home soon. They have early school tomorrow." "They're amazing," he began, opting for sincerity over the calculated lines he'd prepared. "Not just talented, but honest. You can tell just by watching them." Louisa then turned, a soft smile softening her expression. "You are my greatest pride, not for what you do, but for who you are." "You did an incredible job with them," Raphael continued, approaching cautiously. "And with flourish as well. It's amazing to see the impact you've made on so many lives." "I didn't do it alone," she replied with the humility that had always characterized her. "Floresa is the fruit of the work of many hands and hearts." An uncomfortable silence followed. The formalities were over, and they both knew they had reached the moment of truth. The unanswered questions, the unresolved hurts, the 7 years of distance that needed to be confronted. "Why are you here, Raphael?" Louisa finally asked, with a frankness that caught him off guard. "Why did Continental Developments decide to sponsor Floresa? The capital is full of social projects in need of support." Raphael hesitated. The easy answer would be to mention corporate social responsibility, purposeful marketing strategies, tax benefits, and public image. These were the justifications he presented at board meetings and in annual reports. But they weren't the truth, at least not the whole truth. "At first it was because I wanted to know how you were doing," he admitted, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders with the confession. "I found your name in a report about promising social projects in the suburbs, and I couldn't resist. I needed to know if you were okay." Louisa raised her eyebrows, surprised by the unexpected sincerity. "And then? Then I saw what you were building, something genuine, transformative, something with soul," he continued, the words flowing more easily now. "I presented the project to the board as a business opportunity with social impact, but the truth is, I wanted to be a part of it, even if it was from a distance. I wanted to contribute in some way to something that really mattered." An ironic smile played on Louisa's lips. "How ironic, isn't it? You kicked me out of your life because I was a burden to your ambitions, and years later, you used those same ambitions to stay connected to my life." Her bluntness was like a slap in the face, but Raphael knew he deserved every word. "I deserve your resentment, Louisa. What I did was unforgivable." "It's not about forgiveness, Raphael," she replied, surprising him. "I got over the resentment a long time ago. I had to do it to rebuild my life and be the mother my children deserved." She paused, looking out at the city that spread out below them. "Do you know what the greatest lesson I've learned from all of this is? That sometimes we have to lose something precious to discover our true strength. When you pushed me out of your life, I thought it was the end, but it was just the beginning of something I never would have imagined for myself." Raphael absorbed her words, feeling simultaneously relief that she had found her way and a sharp pain at the realization of what she had lost. "And I discovered that achieving everything I thought I wanted can leave a void greater than any ambition can fill." Louisa studied his face for a moment, as if searching for the sincerity behind his words. The man in front of her seemed simultaneously powerful and fragile, his impeccable suit and expensive watch contrasting with his tired eyes and the worry lines that marred his forehead. "Did you get everything you wanted, Raphael?" she asked, with genuine curiosity. "The status, the recognition, the acceptance in that world that you so longed for?" "I did it," he admitted with a mirthless smile. I'm vice president of one of the largest real estate developers in the country. I live in a mansion in Altavilla. I have cars worth more than many apartments. I'm invited to all the important events and consulted on the big decisions in the sector." He paused, running a hand through his prematurely grey hair. "And I come home every night to an empty house, with rooms I never use and objects that bring me no joy. I talk to people who are interested in what I represent, not who I am. I've built my entire life on appearances, Louisa, and it's so empty." The vulnerability in his confession surprised Louisa. This was not the arrogant, ambitious Raphael she had known. There was a humility in him born of suffering, a wisdom gained through mistakes. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, crossing his arms as if to protect himself from the unexpected intimacy of the moment. "Because you deserve to know you were right," he replied simply. "About everything. About what really matters in life. About the emptiness of ambition for ambition's sake. That true wealth lies in the connections we build, not the objects we accumulate." At that moment, the balcony door opened and the triplets appeared, still in their performance attire. "The more you comment and share, the more we can bring you stories that touch your heart. Leave your name in the comments, and we may include you in one of our next stories with a special greeting just for you." "Mom, we've been looking for you for ages," exclaimed Lucas, the most talkative of the three. "There are some people from the youth orchestra who want to talk to us about a project for next year." When they noticed Raphael, the three stopped, observing him curiously. The resemblance between them was striking. The same expressive eyes, the same dark curls, the same confident posture that they had clearly learned from Louisa. "Children, this is Raphael Anders," Louisa introduced, with a naturalness that surprised them both. "He is the vice president of the company that has sponsored our projects." "Your presentation was extraordinary," Raphael said, genuinely impressed. "You have a very special gift." "Thank you, sir," Leo replied, the quietest of the three, with a formal politeness that contrasted with his shyness. "Did you really like it?" asked Lara, the most direct. "The middle part was improvised. We felt it needed more. I don't know how to explain it." "Soul," Lucas added. "I needed more soul." Raphael smiled, touched by the child's sincerity. "You did it. It was the most moving performance I've ever seen." "Do you understand music?" Leo asked, suddenly interested. "Not really," Raphael admitted, "but I understand emotion, and what you created was true." The triplets exchanged meaningful glances as if they shared a silent secret. It was Lara who spoke, with the disconcerting frankness typical of children. "Our mother always says that the truth is what connects people, even when it's hard." Louisa smiled, placing her hands on her children's shoulders. "And now we need to go, dears. It's getting late, and you have school tomorrow." "But, Mom, we didn't even talk properly to the people from the orchestra," protested Lucas. "We can arrange a proper meeting next week," Louisa replied, with the firm but gentle tone Raphael remembered so well. "Now please go get your things while I say goodbye to Mr. Anders." Reluctant but obedient, the triplets left, but not before casting curious glances at Raphael. When the door closed behind them, silence returned, laden with unspoken words. "They are special," Raphael commented, "not only because of their talent, but because of their emotional maturity, because of their awareness." "They had to grow up fast," Louisa replied, a hint of sadness in her voice. "But I try to make sure they don't lose their childhood in the process." Raphael gathered the courage to ask the question that had been eating at him ever since he found out about the children. How did they end up with you?" Louisa hesitated, as if evaluating how much of her personal story she was willing to share. Finally, she decided on the truth. "The Child Protection Council contacted me. Their parents had suffered an accident, and there was no family nearby to take them in. Initially, it would be temporary, just until they found a family for adoption." His gaze softened as he continued. "But from that first night, when Leo picked up his little guitar and played to calm his brothers, I knew we were family, that we had found each other for a reason greater than ourselves." "You've always been brave," Raphael observed, Taking on 3 children at once, all by yourself, while building a project from scratch, most people would shrink from that challenge. It wasn't courage, Louisa corrected. It was love, and maybe a little stubbornness, she added with a smile. I decided that I wouldn't let the world determine my limits, not you, not circumstances, not my own fears. In that moment, something shifted in the dynamic between them. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, or reconciliation. It was a mutual acknowledgement of mistakes, of growth, of divergent paths that had, in some strange way, led them both to more authentic versions of themselves. I have to go, Louisa said, adjusting her shawl over her shoulders. The children are waiting. Of course, Raphael replied, aware that this brief interlude of honesty was coming to an end. Thank you for those few minutes. They meant more than I can express. She nodded, heading for the door. Before she left, however, she turned around one last time. Raphael, can I ask you something? Anything, he replied, eager to prolong the moment. All this support for Floresa, the sponsorships, the housing projects in the community, the infrastructure, would all of that end if you were no longer at Corvin? The question caught him off guard. It wasn't what he expected. Why? Because the work we do is bigger than any personal history between us, she replied firmly. Hundreds of families depend on these programs right now. I can't risk their well-being for sentimentality. Raphael felt a wave of admiration for this woman, who put the collective good above her own emotions. The support will continue regardless of me, he assured. We have turned the project into a corporate success story. It's in the sustainability reports, in the CEO's speeches, in the DNA of the company now. It would be PR suicide to abandon it. Louisa looked relieved. Thank you for your honesty. Louisa, Raphael called when she already had her hand on the doorknob. I regret it, every day. Not only for the way I treated you, but for having wasted the chance to build something meaningful with you. She stared at him for a long moment before answering. Regret is a luxury I've never been able to afford, Raphael. Every choice we've made has led us here. You to your corporate empire, me to my children and flourish. Maybe this was the path we both needed to take. With these words, she left, leaving Raphael alone on the balcony with his thoughts and the view of the city that they had both transformed, each in their own way. When he returned to the main hall, the party was already ending. Guests were saying their goodbyes, promising continued support for the project. Raphael watched from afar as Louisa and the triplets said goodbye to the last guests. There was a harmony between them, a connection that went beyond words, as if they were perfectly fitted pieces of a puzzle that the universe had carefully put together. Marcelo Corvin approached, a nearly empty glass of champagne in his hand. Phenomenal night, wasn't it? Those children are absolute prodigies. And Louisa Salin, what an extraordinary woman. She transformed a simple idea into a social movement. We need more people like that in the country. Yes, Raphael agreed absently, not taking his eyes off the small family group. We do. By the way, I was thinking, Marcelo continued, oblivious to his vice president's distraction, why don't we expand the Floresa model to other communities? We could create a pilot program. The image return would be fantastic, and honestly the social impact would be undeniable. For the first time that night, Raphael felt a spark of genuine professional enthusiasm. That's an excellent idea, he replied, already seeing the possibilities. But we would need to do this in real partnership with the communities. It can't just be a top-down corporate project. Sure, Marcelo agreed, pleased with the interest. That's why we need Louisa Salin involved from the beginning. Do you think she would be willing to consult to expand the model? Raphael watched Louisa hug the triplets as they walked toward the exit, a perfect unit in their imperfection. I think she would consider it, he finally replied, but on her terms, not ours. Always on her terms, laughed Marcelo, who had no idea of the history shared between the two. That woman is a force of nature. Yes, Raphael agreed with a melancholy smile. It always was. That night, as he returned to his empty mansion in Altavilla, Raphael didn't feel the usual emptiness. Something had shifted inside him, not a complete transformation, but the beginning of an awakening. His conversation with Louisa, brief as it had planted a seed of possibility. Not of romantic reconciliation, that chapter was clearly closed, but of personal redemption, of a life with more purpose and less appearance. For the first time in years, Raphael fell asleep without the help of insomnia pills or expensive whiskey, and he dreamed, not of million-dollar contracts or public recognition, but of music that touched the soul and the courage to rebuild his life from the shards of what had once been broken. 6 months had passed since the charity gala at the Theatre. The capital was experiencing the height of spring, with yellow épées dotting the urban landscape like small earthly suns. The Floresa Cultural Center was preparing for its biggest celebration yet, the inauguration of its 4th unit, this time in the heart of the suburbs, the city's second-largest community. The project, an unprecedented partnership between Floresa, Continental Developments, and the local Residents Association, was not just a cultural center, but an integrated complex that included a medium-sized theater, classrooms equipped for various professional courses, a community business incubator, and a large green space with an urban garden and playground for children. Louisa was overseeing the final preparations for the inauguration ceremony, checking details with the meticulousness that characterized her. At 38, she radiated a serene energy, dressed in a vibrant red trouser and blazer, set designed by one of the first graduates of Floresa's fashion course, now a promising fashion designer. "Mom, the tech guys want to know if we can do one last sound check." Lucas, now 12, came over, getting taller and taller, his features beginning to lose the softness of childhood. Leo is adjusting the mix, but he thinks the center microphone is having problems. "Tell him I'm on my way," Louisa replied, finishing checking the VIP guest list with her assistant. "And remind Lara that we need to be ready in an hour. The first guests will start arriving." Lucas nodded and ran off with the inexhaustible energy of pre-adolescence. Louisa watched him with a smile. The triplets had grown so much in the last year, not only physically but in maturity and talents. After their performance at the theatre, they had received several offers of scholarships from prestigious music schools, including some abroad. After much family reflection, they decided to accept scholarships from the renowned Municipal School of Music in the capital, which allowed them to continue living at home while receiving an excellent musical education. The decision reflected the values that Louisa had always cultivated, balancing opportunities for growth with the preservation of family and community ties. The new suburban development represented a significant development in the history of Floresa. For the first time, the project had been conceived from the outset as a public-private community partnership, with active participation by residents at every stage of the planning process. Continental Developments had provided much of the financing and technical expertise, while Floresa had contributed its social development methodology, and the community had provided its in-depth knowledge of its own needs. Behind the scenes of this unprecedented partnership, there was a story that few knew. After meeting again at the charity gala, Raphael Anders had become a staunch advocate for the expansion of the Floresa model within Continental Developments. Initially through formal meetings and later through a dedicated working group, Raphael and Louisa had developed a professional relationship based on mutual respect and shared goals. There was no romance between them. That chapter was definitely over. But something equally valuable had emerged, a partnership that combined Raphael's resources and corporate clout with Louisa's social vision and authenticity, creating a model for urban intervention that was beginning to be studied by universities and replicated by other companies. The Continental Developments helicopter flew over the new complex, preparing to land on the makeshift helipad in the adjacent parking lot. From inside the aircraft, Raphael observed the impressive transformation of the site that, just a year earlier, had been an abandoned construction materials warehouse. Now, a contemporary and sustainable building stood as a symbol of possibility, painted in vibrant colors chosen by the community's residents. Beside him, Marcelo Corvin was reviewing the final documents for the inauguration ceremony. At 65, the chairman of Continental Developments was preparing to officially announce his retirement and the appointment of Raphael as his successor, a decision that, ironically, Raphael had received with mixed feelings. It's amazing how Louisa managed to transform our standard project into something so alive, said Marcelo, watching the lively movement below. When I suggested expanding Floresa to other communities, I never imagined that we would reach this level of integration with the local population. That's what sets her apart, Raphael replied, adjusting his tie as the helicopter began landing. Louisa doesn't create projects for communities, but with them, she makes all the difference. In the past few months, Raphael had transformed significantly. He was still the competent and visionary executive he had always been, but there was a new dimension to him, an authenticity that had surprised his colleagues, and a genuine concern for the social impact of the company's ventures. His wardrobe remained impeccable, but he now preferred community gatherings to dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. His decisions, once guided primarily by financial returns, now balanced profit and purpose in a way that was transforming Corvin's corporate culture. When the helicopter landed and the business delegation disembarked, they were greeted by a group of young musicians from the community, led by the Triplets, who were playing a composition specially created for the occasion. Raphael smiled as he recognized elements of the melody he had heard at the theater, now transformed into something new, brighter, and more hopeful. Louisa approached to give a formal welcome, impeccably professional. "Welcome to the new Floresa Cultural Center," she greeted, extending her hand first to Marcelo and then to Raphael. "The community leaders are eager to show you the results of our collaboration." The guided tour that followed was led not by Floresa executives, but by the residents themselves, who had actively participated in the project. Donna Churema, a 72-year-old woman who had led the community garden planning group, proudly explained how the space already produced medicinal herbs and vegetables that supplied the center's school kitchen. Mateus, a 19-year-old who had left drug trafficking to become a percussion teacher, enthusiastically showed off the recording studio that would allow local talent to produce their own music without having to leave the community. As the procession moved forward, Raphael watched Louisa interact with the residents, the way she effortlessly moved between different worlds, treating with the same genuine respect the suited executives and the community mothers who approached her to share stories or ask for advice. It was this gift of authentic connection that made Floresa so special. It was not just a social project, but a movement rooted in real human relationships. The official opening ceremony was scheduled to take place in the open-air amphitheater built in the center of the complex. Chairs had been arranged in a semicircle, with seats reserved for dignitaries, sponsors, and community leaders in the front row. The rest of the space was open to any resident who wanted to join in the celebration, a decision Louisa had been keen to uphold, despite security concerns raised by the Corvin team. As the guests took their seats, Louisa briefly met with the Triplets backstage. Lucas, Leo, and Lara had composed a special piece for the occasion, which would be performed by young musicians from the community whom they had helped train over the past few months. "Are you nervous?" Louisa asked, adjusting the collar of Leo's shirt, in a maternal gesture that he, entering pre-adolescence, was beginning to find embarrassing but still secretly appreciated. "Not at all," Lucas replied with his usual confidence. "We practiced so much we could play during an earthquake." "I'm a little bit," admitted Lara, always the most honest about her emotions. "But it's that good nervousness, you know? That makes us play better." Leo just smiled, his guitar already tuned and ready. Of the three, he was the one who spoke the least and expressed himself the most through music. "Remember what really matters today," Louisa said, looking everyone in the eye. "It's not technical perfection, but meaning. We're celebrating what committed people can accomplish together, despite differences and difficulties." The three nodded, understanding the depth behind the simple words. Over the years, Louisa had shared with them parts of her personal story, including her failed marriage, and how that apparent failure had turned into the beginning of a journey of discovery and purpose. "It's like our music, Mother," Leo observed, breaking his usual silence. "Pain is also part of the melody. Without it, joy would not be so beautiful." Louisa felt her eyes well up at the unexpected wisdom of her quieter son. "Exactly, my love. Exactly." The amphitheater was already packed. When the ceremony began, city officials, representatives from sponsoring companies, community leaders, and hundreds of local residents created a rare mix in a city as segregated as the capital. On stage, a group of children from the community opened the event with a dance performance that mixed elements of hip-hop and dance. From the front row, Raphael watched everything with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. In the past few months, he had learned to value the vulnerability he had previously considered weakness. His journey of personal transformation was far from over, but each step brought him closer to a more authentic version of himself, one who used his privilege and power not just for accumulation but for transformation. When it was time for the official speeches, Marcelo Corvin took the stage first, representing the project's main sponsor. After the formal words of thanks and celebration, he made the announcement that few expected. "It is with great pleasure that I take this special occasion to officially announce my retirement as chairman of Continental Developments after 35 years at the helm of the company. And it is with even greater pleasure that I announce my successor, Raphael Anders, current vice chairman and key architect of our successful, socially responsible urban development strategy." Polite applause rippled through the amphitheater, most enthusiastic among the corporate representatives who truly understood the magnitude of the announcement. Raphael, however, did not immediately take the stage as expected. He had arranged something different with Marcelo for this occasion. "Before handing over to our future president, I would like to announce one more piece of news," Marcelo continued. "Yesterday, the board of directors of Continental Developments approved the creation of a social investment fund worth $50 million, dedicated exclusively to expanding the Floresa model to other communities in the country. And to lead this initiative, we have invited none other than the founder and soul of the project, Louisa Salon." A buzz of surprise ran through the audience, followed by enthusiastic applause, especially from the community residents. Louisa, who had not been informed of the announcement beforehand, stood motionless backstage for a moment, processing the information. The triplets looked at her expectantly, as surprised as their mother. It was Leo who broke the silence. "You're going to accept, right, Mom? Imagine how many children like us could have the same chance we had." Her son's simple words brought Louisa back to the present moment. With a determined smile, she adjusted her red blazer and walked onto the stage, greeted by a standing ovation that seemed to have no end. This moment represented not only recognition of her work, but validation of her vision, that another form of urban development was possible, one that left no one behind. After briefly thanking the surprising proposal and promising a formal response, in the coming days, Louisa introduced the musical performance that would close the first part of the ceremony. To celebrate this moment of new possibilities, I would like to invite my children, Lucas, Lara, and Leo, to the stage, along with the young musicians of the Floresa project, to present an original composition created especially for this occasion, Invisible Bridges. As the young musicians took their places on stage, Raphael noticed an unusual movement in the sky. A helicopter was approaching, but it wasn't from Corvin or any other company that was partnering with the event. Confused, he consulted his assistant, who quickly checked her phone before responding with an enigmatic smile. "It's a surprise organized by Louisa. Apparently, she has her own helicopter coming." The buzz in the amphitheater increased as the helicopter, painted in the vibrant colors of Floresa, landed on the adjacent helipad. Moments later, to everyone's astonishment, Louisa reappeared not through the side access to the stage, but from the back of the amphitheater, walking down the central aisle accompanied by a group of women of different ages, all wearing vibrant colors that contrasted with the predominant gray of the urban landscape. It was a triumphant entrance, not because of its ostentation, but because of its symbolism. These women, as Louisa would later explain, were the first beneficiaries of Floresa, now transformed into community leaders, social entrepreneurs and educators who replicated the model in their own communities. The helicopter, far from being a symbol of individual status, represented the collective elevation of those who had once been considered invisible by society. When the group arrived on stage, the music began. The Triplets led the youth orchestra with a composition that mixed elements of classical music, rap, and different rhythms, a fusion that symbolized the local cultural diversity and the integrative philosophy of Floresa. From the audience, Raphael watched the scene with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. The confident, enlightened woman, in the center of the stage, surrounded by people whose lives she had transformed, was the same woman he had once considered an obstacle to his ambitions. The contrast between his limited vision at the time and the majestic reality he was witnessing now could not have been more eloquent. When the music reached its peak, Louisa took the microphone for a speech that was not on the official program. This celebration is not just about a new building or a new project. It is about a new way of building our cities and our lives. For too long, we have believed that development meant separation. Gated communities on one side, invisible communities on the other. Individual success on one side, collective dreams abandoned on the other. His voice, firm and emotional, echoed through the silent amphitheater. Floresa was born out of deep pain from a moment when I lost everything that I thought defined my life. But I discovered that when we lose what is superficial, we often find what is essential. I found not only a new direction, but a new family and a new understanding of what wealth truly means. His eyes briefly met Raphael's in the audience before continuing. True wealth is not what we accumulate, but what we share. It is not what we build for ourselves, but what we build together. It is not how high we climb alone, but how high we can lift others with us. Pointing to the new cultural center that was rising around them, he concluded, "This space is proof that another path is possible. A path where companies understand that profit and purpose can go hand in hand, where communities understand their own power of transformation, where invisible barriers that separate us can be transformed into bridges that connect us." The ovation that followed was deafening. People from all walks of life, business people, community residents, authorities, children, gave a standing ovation, many with tears in their eyes. It was as if Louisa had given voice to a collective yearning for a more integrated and humane city. Backstage on stage, as the celebration continued with cultural performances from the community, Raphael finally got a moment alone with Louisa. "Spectacular entrance," he commented with a genuine smile. "The helicopter was a special touch." Louisa laughed, her eyes shining with a joy that was part amusement, part personal accomplishment. "I thought you'd appreciate the irony of the woman too simple for your sophisticated world arriving by helicopter to inaugurate a project that is transforming the city." "Deserved," he replied, without a trace of resentment. "Every achievement of yours is absolutely deserved, Louisa." There was a moment of comfortable silence between them, no longer filled with unresolved hurts or bitter regrets, but with a mutual recognition of the path each had taken. "Are you going to accept the fund's proposal?" Raphael finally asked. "It was my idea, but Marcelo embraced it with enthusiasm. The board is convinced that it is both a good deal and the right thing to do." "Probably yes," Louisa replied, watching the Triplets chatting animatedly with other young musicians. "But on my terms. The fund will need to have shared governance, with representatives from the communities themselves on the board, and the projects will need to come from the inside out, not the top down." "I wouldn't expect anything less from you," Raphael smiled. "And as for me taking over as president—" "Congratulations," she interrupted sincerely. "It's a huge responsibility. It's also an opportunity," he added, "to use resources and influence to multiply initiatives like this, to show that businesses can be forces for positive transformation." Louisa studied his face for a moment, seeing beyond the polished facade of the successful executive. "You've changed, Raphael." "Thanks to you in large part," he admitted. "Or maybe thanks to your absence, which forced me to finally see the void I'd built around myself." Before Louisa could respond, the triplets approached, interrupting the intimate moment. They were accompanied by a group of teenagers from the community, all still excited by the energy of the presentation. Have you signed up yet? Do it now and tell us which city you're following.
Us from